Happy Friday, LinkedIn. Happy Friday, world. I do realize you could be listening to this on the YouTubes sometime after now. And if you are, that's cool. But as we are streaming live here on LinkedIn, it is Friday afternoon and I am giddy as usual. Not afternoon, still morning, 11 o'clock here on the East Coast. It's Friday afternoon if you are in overseas in the UK or in Europe or somewhere else. So welcome. I'm super glad you could be here. As usual, we're going to give it a few minutes for folks to stream in. But we're going to talk about DIY MDM. Yes, that's a lot of acronyms. DIY standing, of course, for my favorite thing on the weekends, do it yourself, and MDM for master data management. If you came from mobile device management, you're on the wrong flight. We can talk about device management if you want, if that's one of the questions you want to ask, because this is also an ask me anything. You can ask me anything: data strategy, data governance, data quality, you name it. Go ahead, let the questions rip. If you do ask me a question about mobile device management, I'll say I won't have a ton to offer. Although there was a time in my life when I ran an IT organization and I actually was responsible for mobile device management and the software that lives on cell phones and make sure that you don't do stupid things with your corporate owned phone. But no, we're not here to talk about mobile device management. We are here to talk about MDM and anything you want to talk about. There is no wrong question to ask here on this amazing Friday morning, as I'm coming to you live from my little beach town here in Central Florida, on the East Coast of Central Florida. It's a wonderful morning here today. Let's check out who's joining while we're giving people time to coalesce on our topic of DIY MDM. Who's joining today? Hello, Jose from LA County. Glad you could make it. Suman, glad you could make it. Parak, glad you could make it. Sitambiso, nice you could make it as well. Hopefully I didn't say your name too poorly. Joseph, glad you could make it. Two Josephs, Gumont and Joseph Abraham, glad you could both make it. Hey, Nick, Master Data Management Engineer, that's fantastic. Hopefully everything I say makes sense today. Hello, SN on LinkedIn. Stockholm, Sweden. What time is it in Stockholm? 6 Central European time, is it not? 7 p.m. Glad you could make it. Thank you for coming this evening, taking time away from your family or friends in Stockholm. I actually might get to Stockholm this year. There's an event that we want to do later this summer. I've never been to Stockholm, so I'm totally excited about that. Eshan, if I come, I'll let you know. Haley McDonald from Alpharetta. Roswell. Let's be more specific. Roswell, not Alpharetta. So glad everybody could be joining today. Cape Town, South Africa. My gosh, Jeff Fisher in the ATX, my old hometown. Jeff, I lived in a little place called Cedar Park for 20 years, believe it or not, and only left recently to make my escape here to the beach in Florida. But I love Austin. If I was like 20, 30, even into my early 40s and I was raising a family, I would be in Austin, Texas. It's an amazing place. Hey, Prakash, glad you could be coming today. Welcome from New Jersey. Hopefully it doesn't snow this weekend. I hear there's maybe a storm coming to the Northeast. Hopefully it's not too bad. Michael from Iowa. Chris from Buffalo, New York, just across the border from my birth country of Canada. I could probably use a Stockholm guide, Eshan. No doubt about that. Suman, you're calling all the way. You're coming in from India. That's fantastic. Oh, Nick. We've talked before. So glad you could make it, Nick. Hope you're seeing. I hope you're seeing. Springtime coming. I was born and raised in a cold environment, and this time of year, the days start getting longer, the sun starts getting a little stronger, and the snow starts to melt, and you get excited. And hopefully, March stays nice, and you don't get like one of those late season storms that is soul crushing. Belgium, Geert, so glad you could make it. Love Belgium. Love it. Brussels is one of my favorite cities. Brussels is absolutely one of my favorite cities. It's close. In Europe, Brussels, towards the top of the list. Edinburgh, Scotland, also towards the top of the list. They're both walkable, both ancient, both historic, both wonderful. Lee from Minnesota, glad you could be here. Tropical, 35 degrees. That's what I'm talking about, Nick. You know, right? The sun comes out, starts to melt a little bit, and your hopes just you know how it is this time of year. Anyway, hey, let's talk about MDM, DIY, do it yourself, MDM. I need to start with a disclaimer. I'm going to talk mostly about technology today. MDM, Master Data Management, is first and foremost a discipline: people, process, technology. It requires all three things. People, of course, critically important. Process, related to data governance, related to setting and enforcing and managing data governance policies. Things like data definitions, data rules, data quality rules. Those are all process related. Things like creating new records, searching before we create, all of that stuff is process. Critically important. There is technology. All three things together combine to form the discipline that is known as MDM. So there may be some of you out there watching this, maybe after the fact, saying, hey, MDM is about people and process first and foremost. Yes, it is. But I am going to be talking mostly about technology today, because I would argue technology is a necessary piece of the puzzle. Can you do MDM on an Excel spreadsheet? Sure. I wouldn't recommend it. You're not going to be able to run at scale. And that's really the difference here, folks. The difference is scale, right? There is some point where companies, this point is changing. I would argue a few years ago that if you were under like $1 billion in sales as a company, maybe you didn't necessarily need MDM, but things are changing. Thanks to democratization of IT, that's what we used to call it 10 years ago. I'm showing my age. Thanks to the widespread adoption of cloud-based software solutions, and thanks to OpEx-based kind of friendly subscription models where anybody in marketing can go buy a tool, anybody in procurement could go buy a tool, silos are popping up all over the place. 10 years ago, it was reasonably hard to create a silo because you had to go deploy hardware in a data center somewhere. It took money to do that, took time to do that. It took time to set all that stuff up. Now you got people in marketing just going buying silos, as it were, which means the need for MDM is more widespread than it's ever been before, because there's more silos than there's ever been before, because it's easy to create a silo. It's really easy to create a silo. I just rambled on about two examples, people doing it in marketing and people doing it in procurement, but people do it all over the place. So kind of that barrier to entry of needing technology is coming down. We're working at Profisee now. We're working with companies that are 200 million, 300 million that are easily justifying an investment in MDM and need it because those silos have formed. We need MDM to break those silos. So this is a riff about, can you do MDM on Excel? Yeah. Wouldn't recommend it. We're going to talk more about why I don't recommend that and why I don't recommend DIY and a lot of different use cases. But there are still some reasonably small companies out there where you can work around the silo problem, right? You can put somebody in a swivel chair, right? This is the old, swivel chair, where you are taking data out of a CRM and manually, rekeying that into an ERP, or taking a Salesforce ID, an opportunity ID, or a contract ID, and manually typing that into your ERP so that your RevRec and your GL and your ERP aligns to contract and opportunity and forecast related data in Salesforce. You can do that kind of stuff. Or where you're retyping in from one system to another. You can arguably get away with that for a while, but it's going to be really, really hard to scale, right? It's going to be hard to scale. And that's the greatest value out of MDM, I would argue, is having a single place to manage a lot of these rules where you configure, not code, and you can drive scale. So can you do it without software? Yes, but at a certain point, you're going to need it in order to scale. Let's start by me sharing a story. Stories are fun, right? And how I learned the hard way, which is pretty much Just about every story that I have to tell in the data and analytics space, I learned the hard way. This, you see this stuff? That's real gray hair. And it's coming out of my face now too, because I'm getting so old. But I would argue at least 50% of these gray hairs are from doing things the wrong way in data and analytics. And that's why I'm sharing my stories with you. I won't name any specific companies to protect them and avoid potential lawsuits. But there was a time when I was responsible for deploying MDM, and I worked at a company that I had a hard time justifying an investment in MDM, and I tried, right? And again, the hard way, I was trying the wrong way. I was trying to get money to invest in MDM. And I was building these business cases that were all about better data and all about better data quality. And at that time, I hadn't quite figured out that the best way to get an investment in MDM is to actually find ways to solve business problems, drive revenue, reduce costs, reduce risk. And I kept making these business cases around better data, like, reducing our nulls or eliminating duplicate records in our CRM or even just making things more efficient, getting rid of the swivel chairs, which the business really didn't care that much about because there wasn't a ton of savings there. So I was trying and failing in order to get an MDM program off the ground. So what did we do? We said, okay, let's build it ourselves. Let's DIY this. And what we ended up doing was building kind of a pseudo MDM. We were using Dun & Bradstreet for some matching. We built some stewardship UIs in Salesforce. So so we had kind of cobbled together some capabilities around MDM. D&B was reasonably good at matching, although it was better for sales and marketing than it was for finance, or it's actually the opposite. It was better for finance than it was for sales and marketing. We had a lot of people in sales and marketing saying, what is this? And because we had kind of prioritized Dun & Bradstreet data over all other data. And we had found a way to kind of cobble together something that looked like an MDM. That included customized survivorship rules. Oh boy. Again, learning the hard way. Built some kind of customized survivorship rules because after we were matching with D&B, we tried to do some of our own matching as a second pass, as it were, after D&B took their cut and 30 to 40% weren't matching. And then we had to try and go match those. And it got ugly fast. It got ugly reasonably fast. The workflows were wonky. The matching was wonky. We couldn't get anybody to do stewardship anyway because they weren't seeing the value out of this wonky thing that we had created. Spend a reasonable amount of time and money trying to get something off the ground. I don't want to say exactly how much, but we took, my guess is, the better part of 2 to 3 engineering resources for 3 to 4 months, maybe even more than that. Throw in some QA, throw in project management resources, I don't know how much that thing cost, but it ended up being a train wreck. So it didn't solve any problems, wasn't scalable. We had a lot of business rules that were hard coded in code. The business rules that were hard coded in some of the ETL that we were using to move data around, including taking data out of Salesforce and data out of our Oracle ERP, and it didn't work. It ended up being a massive waste of money. Wasn't even a valuable POC. So, long way of saying, I've learned the hard way that DIY MDM is difficult. Why is it difficult? Here's where we fall into a lot of traps. Because if you break MDM software into its component parts, at Gartner, when I was an analyst, we would call these things critical capabilities, right? There's about 12 or 13 of them. From a functionality perspective, there's really only about 7 or 8, because a bunch of the critical capabilities that Gartner defines are actually more about architecture and how you actually implement MDM from a rules and governance perspective, in terms of like styles of MDM. That's one of the critical capabilities. You need to have multiple implementation styles. But when you look at the critical capabilities, integration, workflow, data quality, stewardship, persistence, modeling of data, right? When you look at all those things, there's a natural attraction, I would argue. There's a natural attraction. If you gave that task to an engineer, and you also said, an internal engineer, by the way, and you also said, hey, let's keep the cost as low as we can, there's a natural attraction because chances are pretty good that maybe some of those capabilities already exist in your organization. Maybe you're already using Informatica for integration. Maybe you're using Talon. Maybe you're using, who knows, a Microsoft tool for integration. Maybe you've already got a data quality tool that you invested in a few years ago. Maybe you've got, something like a Salesforce that you think that you could use for some stewardship UIs, or maybe you've got the ability to build some customized UIs. If you look at the core capabilities, I think you could convince yourself, if you're an engineer, and they love to solve problems, by the way. If you give an engineer a Rubik's Cube, they're going to sit down and they're going to try to solve it. So if you look just at the capabilities and you said, I could build something that's 60, 70%, right? I could build something that's 60 or 70%, and I could throw all these things together and I could come up with DIY MDM. Guys, this is the exact thought process I had been through. Right, I had been through, because we had an integration tool already. We had some capabilities to do all this stuff already. We had some capabilities we were bringing to the table from D&B and others, right? So we convinced ourselves at a capability level that we could do it. Then you try to put it all together, right? Then you try to build a customized solution where all these things are working coherently and consistently across a seamless, consistent workflow. Things start to get pretty hard pretty quick. If we just look at this from a pure math perspective, I like math, the cost can get pretty big. Before I jump into that, I'm going to take a break because I've been talking consistently. I'm going to have some water and say hi. Hey, Andrew from Windsor, Ontario. I was in Windsor last summer. Oh, I lie. Sorry, I was in Detroit. Shame on me. And as a Canadian, I should know better. I was in Detroit. I wasn't actually in Windsor, but so close to each other. Hey, Camille from the most beautiful city of Paris. Peter, so nice to see you. Peter Reynolds, glad you could make it. Limited savings and swivel chair integration. Yes, limited savings. I mean, what's an FTE that does data entry cost, right? When you're talking about this is a trap so many of us fall into when we start building business cases. This is for anything in the data and analytics space, by the way. There will almost always be an efficiency play within the data function, right? If you're trying to build a business case to justify anything, it's an integration tool. Okay, so we can configure some of these integrations, and we can, instead of having to hand roll a lot of the integrations. When it comes to building a business case, if you're talking about a cost reduction that are tied to FDEs in the data and analytics world, it's a really hard sell, because basically you're asking data leaders to reduce the size of their teams. And for anybody that has led a team like I have, once that money is gone, getting it back is 50 times harder than it was just to keep it. Right? So justifying incremental, if that headcount cash, if that money associated to that headcount gets moved away, getting that back is a huge effort for most leaders. So there's a natural, and I don't want to get into the philosophy here, whether that's right or wrong, but there's a natural inclination for all data leaders, all leaders writ large, by the way, and there's no judgment here because I've been in this position. There's a natural inclination to try to hold on to those resources. So it's natural to say, oh, okay, we can reduce the headcount of the data function, make the data function more efficient. We can drive down our costs of data quality or data stewardship, or drive down the stewardship thing. But that is such a hard business case to make. The cost saving business case is a really hard one. And frankly, guys, there's not going to be a ton of money there. Yes, we could reduce. Okay, maybe it's $100,000 US dollars. Okay, maybe you're reducing 2, 3, 4 people. Okay, if you can convince that brave data leader to downsize their team and to lose that headcount and to lose the budget associated to that headcount, even if you could do that, those numbers, I guarantee you this, my friends, I guarantee you those numbers would pale by comparison to the numbers if you focused on the business side, if you focused on the revenue side, things like cross-sale, upsell, driving down your inventory costs in procurement, driving down your cost of buying anything, optimizing your relationship with your suppliers. I could go on and on and on. But when it comes to MDM, there's no shortage of KPIs here that we could be focused on from a business perspective. We always defer back to like these headcount reductions in data analytics. They're really hard to sell when right before us there could be some amazing business justifications on the business justifications on the business side. This is the level of insight that you came for today. There are business justifications out there that I guarantee you are going to be 10x whatever you could save on the cost side by having a headcount reduction in data and analytics or in IT writ large. Anyway, that's my rant about business cases. We should probably do more of this content talking about how to build business cases, how to do these cost justifications for MDM, because that is a major opportunity for all of us. Yes, Andrew, South Windsor is South Detroit. Fun trivia fact, right? I mean, and you already know the answer to this question, but what city is directly south of Detroit? It's Windsor. What country is directly south of Detroit? People will say Mexico. Nope, it's Canada. Windsor just kind of hooks right underneath, as you know, Andrew. Anyway, fun trivia. I said I was going to drink and I didn't. I got this. Here's another fun fact. I got this water bottle. It's at least 5 years old. And I got it and I was using it while I was an analyst at Gartner. And there's a piece of tape here, this duct tape, because that's covering the name of a vendor. That's how focused we were at Gartner on trying to not show favorites. Was that I was instructed to cover a vendor name on my water bottle so as to not show favorites when I was on video calls while I was an analyst. How about that? All right, where was I? I was going to talk about money. I'm going to talk about money a little bit more, but let's make sure we're saying hi. Hello, Kurt from Chicago. I will be in Chicago a few times this year. Looking forward to that. Hi, Partha from India. Michael, Nice Warner, I hope you found your way into the presentation. Yes, it has already started. No specific questions yet. By the way, if you're in LinkedIn, you already know how to ask a question. That's cool. If you're on our Goldcast platform, just put a question into the chat if you want. There is a question tab. Just go ahead and ask something in the chat. And if you're already chatting, that's fantastic. There's a whole bunch of folks that haven't actually said hi, and that's okay. But I may call you out directly. Adam Morella, hello. We already said hi to Geert. Anyway, enough of me refreshing my brain. Hey, is it Thea or Tia? Hard H or hard T? Or soft T or hard T? Thea from Atlanta, hello. Or Tia. Nice to see you. Hello, Suman. Oh, a question. Wonderful. How do you see MDM modernizing in the coming 5 to 10 years? Let me put a note of that. Future. We will talk about that a little bit later. I love that topic, by the way, though. It's a good one. Oh, hi, Peter. You already said hi. Hi, Arvind. Glad you could be here. Thank you for joining. Okay. So why, I've already talked from a DIY perspective. I talked about a few things already. One, I think that increasingly MDM as a software solution makes sense for so many companies where it may not have made sense before, where it makes complete sense now for companies that are in the $100 million, $200 million range of revenue. Again, no magic number here, where it makes complete sense because there are so many more silos than there ever have been before. So we talked about that. Oh, I see, Eshen. Understand ownership part of master data. I mean, okay, good. That's a good question. Ownership. I love that question. So we talked about MDM is increasingly being adopted at a number of different companies. I shared some of my nightmare stories about trying to build a DIY MDM solution. And by the way, When I was a Gartner analyst, I heard about DIY MDM all the time. It was definitely in the top 10 questions that I would receive as an analyst, build or buy. So this is a thing. A lot of people think that you can go out and build this. Then I talked about the critical capabilities of MDM, things like data quality, data stewardship, data integration, workflow, right? Like getting alerts. Hey, there's a new master record that needs to be stewarded, or hey, there's a match that you need to review. That type of workflow capability, where you have a place as a data steward, you have a single place where you can go in and do your data work, your daily data work, right? That's one of the critical capabilities. Obviously, modeling and persistence is another critical capability. Data governance is a critical capability of MDM. Who can see what and under what conditions? Who can create a new record? Who can't? And on and on. Those critical capabilities, you need to find a way to put them all together. If you're going to do MDM, you need to do all those critical capabilities. If you're not doing all those things, then you're building something, but it's not MDM. I don't know what it is, right? So aligning on the definition, maybe that's what we're talking about here. Gartner has a particularly useful definition here of master data, and they also have a useful definition of master data management. If you just Google Gartner IT glossary, they've got a great IT glossary. And so aligning on definitions is probably helpful. When I say building or DIY MDM, I will defer to Gartner's definition of MDM. Then I started to talk about some of the cost components. So let's get into that a little bit more. This is a comparison game, build or buy, right? So let's talk about buy really briefly. What we have seen in the MDM software space for the last 10 years, consistently, every year over year, the prices of MDM software are coming down. This is a very, very good thing. Why are these prices coming down? Well, there's a lot of factors there. One is increasing competition. That's a good thing. Another reason why is because of the push to the cloud and SaaS, right? So there was a time when you had to kind of deploy everything on-prem and on your own metal, and there were costs to that. So that's a good thing that we're going to SaaS, and it's easy to turn up. There's other reasons why for increasing costs. The competition or decreasing costs. Sorry, Friday. There's a lot of other reasons for decreasing costs. I think because the size of the market is actually growing, we're going more down market into markets that are arguably a little bit more price sensitive. MDM is no longer the domain of the biggest of the big companies. So put all this together, and the average cost for MDM software, I would argue now is in the high six figures, probably 150 to 200,000. And that's an annual subscription, right? That's an annual subscription for a year. But that's all domains, all vendors, all customers, right? It is not uncommon to see, annual costs for an MDM subscription to be under six figures, right? There's a lot of variables here, guys, right? So don't take my word for this. Obviously, the biggest variable being the number of records that you've got managed and persisted in the hub, right? Somebody needs to pay for storage and compute, whether you're paying for storage and compute or whether your SaaS-based vendor like Profisee is paying for storage compute on your behalf. Those storage and compute costs need to be paid one way or the other. They're going to be paid for. So volume of records is a huge driver. Yes, there are still things like, number of people that are using the system. There are maintenance costs, which are arguably or significantly, not arguably, or significantly lower when it comes to software as a service models. So costs are coming down, right? So take the kind of the high six-figure thing with a grain of salt, right? Because that's all customers, all domains, customer, product, supplier, you name it, all verticals, healthcare, manufacturing. So it just take it with a grain of salt. This is my way of saying that the average costs of MDM software are coming down. Okay, so that's the cost side. That's on the buy. On the build, what would it take to build a piece of MDM software? How many engineers would it take you? What's the average cost of those engineers? By my estimate, to have something that is even remotely close, like not even 100%, because you're not like, it will take you years and years. Like if you started from scratch, it would take you years to build something from a capabilities perspective that was on par to something you can go buy for 150,000 a year, right? Years and years. let's just assume that you could get to 60 or 70% parity in 2 years. I have a hard time believing that, but let's just argue that you did. And let's say you needed a team of 5 people to do it. What's the average cost of a software developer, right, in the United States? Maybe offshore resource. Let's just like say 100,000. It's certainly more than that, but that's 500,000 over 3 years, right? Over 2 to 3 years would be my guess, right? So you could maybe get to 60 to 70% parity in 3 years for the same cost that it would take you to buy that off the shelf. But even then, the vendors are moving forward, right? All the vendors are innovating and building and adapting. They have teams of like 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, maybe more people that all they do is MDM. Meanwhile, you've got 60% of a solution that you bought and paid for, that you need to maintain, that you need to consistently evolve. And the minute you, and we all know this, folks, we're in IT. The minute you put something into production is the minute people start wanting more from it. It's just how it is, right? Like, hey, you're in production. Yay. Now I need more, right? I need this added. I need this added. And I need this added. Lo and behold, you're in the MDM software business, right? And do you really want to be in the MDM software business? So from a cost perspective, what you can get as a SaaS-based solution by comparison to what it would cost you to build that, the numbers just don't make any sense. Could you maybe, as maybe a very brief POC, could you justify building something on your own as a POC? Maybe. I doubt it. I tried that. That's what our V1 DIY MDM was supposed to be. This is like this kind of like POC, get the business excited, get them bought in, get them invested in MDM. It turned out to be a train wreck. And I work for a software company. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, could you cobble something together? Could you justify, hey, let's get something off the ground? Maybe, but I still have a hard time seeing that, folks. I still have a hard time seeing that. Let's get to some of the questions. Let me scroll back up because I've been ranting and I've not been paying enough attention to the questions. Okay, Eshant, let's get back to the ownership of master data. I dislike the word owner. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. That's what happens when you talk as much as I do. I know I could run across my room and go grab my DM Bach, my DAMA data management book of knowledge. I know that the DM Bach, and for those of us who are CDMP certified, I know that the concept of data ownership is intrinsic to data governance, at least from a DAMA perspective. I understand that, but I really dislike the idea of ownership. And the reason why I dislike the idea of ownership in the world of master data, and largely most data, but let me continue. Master data is inherently shared data. One way to think about this, guys, is a 3-ring Venn diagram, like 3 rings. Just imagine 3 rings. Okay, so there's 3 zones on that Venn diagram. There's the stuff in the middle, there's the stuff on the edge, and then there's the stuff on the outside. The stuff in the middle is master data because it is widely shared across processes, across applications, across functions, across domains. That data is widely shared. The idea that any one person, and I see this all the time. I would see this all the time. Is like this person, who is like a senior data steward, right? Somebody probably in the middle of their career gets the unenviable job of being assigned the customer data owner. And chances are they're in IT. Like, that is a recipe for success or for failure, not success, failure. It's a recipe for failure. Why? Because master data is shared. It's shared because sales has a say, marketing has a say, finance has a say. Multiple organizations across the organization have a say in how that stuff is defined, how it's governed, quality standards. And then you're going to make one person in IT say, okay, you own it. No, they don't. They don't. Ownership of master data is inherently collaborative. And I know people don't like to hear that, but it is inherently collaborative. If you need one person to be ultimately responsible for that and to make sure everybody is actually adhering to the rules, everybody is doing their fair share from a stewardship perspective, they're going to governance committee meetings where we're talking about how to manage this data. If you need one person to be that person, arguably the best person is the CFO. Maybe the CIO, but I'd prefer them to be on the business side. But it's going to be more than likely the best person is the CFO. If you just need one person to make sure people fall in line. But I just dislike the idea of ownership, because that Venn diagram, that middle there, data is widely shared. Now, on the edges, data is shared, but it's just shared less. Maybe it's data that is shared between sales and between finance. I would argue that is still master data, because you still need to have collaboration on the data governance, and you still have to manage that data in a way that there is consensus on how it's defined and if it's accurate or not accurate, and how it's governed and how it's shared and who can see it, right? Again, a collaborative access. Now, the data on the edges, not shared anywhere else. It's like, for example, maybe in Salesforce, in a CRM, you could have 200 fields on a customer record. 10 of them may be shared widely, and the rest, the 190, knock yourself out. Own that data all day long. You can have marketing own that data because it never goes outside of marketing. It's only relevant to marketing. Then you can assign the one single owner. This is what I really don't like about the data mesh, is because what the data mesh said is it's all local. Do whatever you want. It's domain centric. Hip, hip, hooray. Let marketing define a customer. Let finance define a customer. Let procurement define a customer. Let HR define a customer. Domain centric. Yay. But then everything breaks from a cross-functional perspective. And what finance sees is different than what marketing sees. And that may be okay for certain business processes. But if your CFO asks, how many customers do we have? There is only one answer to that question for that domain. So you need to necessarily solve the cross-domain problem. This is why I am not a fan of the data mesh at all. And I'm not a fan of saying one person in IT is going to own master data. It's not a recipe for success. It is a collaborative enterprise. Sean, that is a long answer to a very short question. Hopefully it makes sense. Peter, any update advances in federating MDM to domains within the enterprise or even between organizations? Well, technology, we've always had the technology to be fully federated, right? We've always had the technology to be fully federated. Where, basically you have a central set of rules, right? And those rules are managed locally. There's both centralized rules and local rules. That's kind of how I view federation. The problem, again, with the challenge with master data is finding rules and aligning on those rules for cross-functional use cases, right? When you are looking more holistically, when you're looking across business processes, quote to cash, procure to pay, coming up with the rules for how to manage those use cases and manage the treatment of that data is still a challenge for a lot of organizations. But the technologies it's there. It's been there for a long time. One way to look at this is maybe over a pyramid with 3 levels. Again, another kind of visual metaphor here, but at the bottom of the pyramid is functional, right? The domain, cross-functional, enterprise-wide. You need to have, this is where the things get really interesting. I would argue that the definition of truth is contextually bound. And what is true at the bottom of the pyramid may not necessarily be true that was true at the top of that pyramid, but you need to manage both. So the challenge around full federation, Peter, as I see it, is not the fact that you have to have one set of rules to rule them all, because we know that really doesn't work. It really doesn't work that well. One set for everybody, right? You need to have 3 sets of rules, and you need to manage them concurrently, right? And you need to be very context aware. This is where I see the future of MDM going, by the way, to the question about the future of MDM. For so long, we tried to have one set of rules for everybody and force all those rules. And generally, they came from the top down. Not always, but generally, they came from the top down, where maybe the CFO said, here's how we're going to define a customer, and everybody needs to adhere to it. In some organizations, that's fine, right? A lot of manufacturing-centric organizations are very process and engineering-centric, where adhering to that one set of standards is totally fine. But for other companies, it's less of a good fit, right? So what we need to do in those companies is figure out how to have three sets of rules coexist together. The challenge there is not a technical one, it is a governance one. Because instead of having one set of rules, now you need to have three, or maybe N. N is a norm in sets of rules based on the context of data, based on the context of truth. That's hard to do for a lot of companies and requires high degrees of maturity. But that's where I see things going. And that's where I see AI having the greatest impact. Because AI can start helping us build and defining and even implementing and managing some of the governance policies for those various contexts. Simply cross-functional, functional, cross-functional, enterprise-wide, right? Defining all of those rules will be really hard for a lot of governance organizations, but that's what I see the future being. And that's what I see the future of federation becoming, is that things coexist, that you could have a set of business rules for the C-suite that makes sense for them, and you could have a set of rules for the functions that make sense for them, and they both coexist. What I saw with the mesh is that it is all domain centric. Yes, the mesh said, okay, well, we need to have these things called polyscenes where we enable cross-functional sharing. But I don't know how you do that in a purely decentralized organization that's all peer-to-peer. Where, I mean, you can't scale. There's no way you can scale that. I digress. Hopefully, Peter, that kind of addresses the question. Hopefully. Mohit, hello. Talking about technology, when and why to consider integrating MDM Hub with the data warehouse platform during MDM journey? Hey, that's a great question. And we're seeing more and more of the data warehouse providers, the Snowflakes and Databricks of the world and Microsofts of the world, saying they do MDM. News alert, they don't. They don't. For a lot of different reasons. But if you look at Databricks, for example, like they say, hey, come do MDM in Databricks. But if you look across all those critical capabilities that I was mentioning earlier, right? Stewardship, governance, quality, workflow, to try to build something in Databricks that comes anywhere close to the capabilities you could get from a vendor like Profisee, that's a ton of work, man. And I don't know why you would want to do it, because you're not like, can you create a data pipeline where as a part of that pipeline, you fold in, you go, use Python to do some matching, because there's some open source matching scripts out there. I was looking at one the other day called Splink. Interesting name. Some Python libraries for matching. Could you do it? Yeah, maybe. Could you get to 60 to 70%? Maybe. But is that scalable? No. Is it flexible? No. Is it easy to configure? No. So yeah, I could drive a car with my feet. It doesn't mean I should be doing it. Can you build and cobble together a customized, very code-driven thing that looks kind of like MDM and Databricks? No, you can't. What we should be looking at instead is MDM providers that integrate to a Databricks, right? Or integrate to a Microsoft, right? Where you can actually have a flow of data between, in the case of Microsoft, something sitting in a Delta Parquet where we pull that data out, bring it into an MDM, do all the MDM goodness like matching and stewardship and governance and data quality rules, and then expose that data back into your warehouse. Yes, absolutely, positively, you could be doing that. Something the Profisee is doing. Really proud of our integration to Microsoft. So, I would argue MDM is still the domain of a limited number of vendors. And the best thing you could do from a warehouse perspective is to partner with an MDM software provider that is integrated to that warehouse instead of trying to build one from scratch. Same thing is true with Snowflake, by the way, with everything I said about Databricks. Just change the name. Hopefully that answers the question, Mohit. You're welcome, Michonne. Let me look at Goalcast. David, hey, from Toronto, Big Smoke. You don't hear people say that anymore as a nickname for Toronto. I don't know why. How do you feel MDM software fits in the partnership with AI and tools that can bring together structured and unstructured data increasingly more efficiently? Oh, man, David, what a great question. What a great question. This is, if you follow me on LinkedIn, This area of, we've only got 15 minutes. My gosh, I could talk, David. I could talk for 50. I could talk for more than 50 minutes on this. The whole world of unstructured data represents a massive opportunity for the data and analytics space writ large. What I have seen over my many years in this business, including many as an analyst, is that most of our governance and stewardship and data management efforts, this includes MDM, is on structured data, right? It's the stuff we need for BI. What we need for BI is not what we need for AI, particularly Gen AI, okay? So when I use the word AI in the next 3 to 4 minute rant, it's Gen AI, okay? So just keep that in mind. Gen AI is built on and optimized by text. It was built on the internet. It scraped all the text on the internet, right? So it's built on that, right? And we optimize it by text prompts, having really smart prompts. When you try to throw a table at Gen AI, it doesn't do so well. Text to SQL just doesn't work, or SQL to text, it just doesn't work that well. It is not, Gen AI is not set up to work that way. It's set up to work and mimic human language. Rows and columns has a problem with that. Are there things that we could be doing to rows and columns to make them a little more digestible during what is called a RAG pattern, a retrieval augmented generation pattern? Yes, most certainly. And there's some cool things happening in that space. All of the AI providers, including Microsoft, using their tools like OpenAI Studio, are allowing you to create more complex RAG patterns. Probably the most promise there to take stuff out of structured data sets and to get it to an LLM in a way that makes sense, or a little bit more sense, is to run knowledge graphs on them and to provide that data as triples into a query, right? Malcolm lives Florida. Right? That's a triple. That's a graph triple. So there's work being done here to try to solve this problem. But I think the greater opportunity here is for us to find a way to put our arms around all of that unstructured data, right? All of that data sitting in SharePoint servers and Word docs. And oh my gosh, the Pareto principle would suggest that 80% of our data is largely probably unmanaged, ungoverned, unstewarded, right? Ungoverned. It's out there. This is the Air Canada use case, by the way. This is why Air Canada ended up getting sued, because their chatbot gave incorrect information because they had old, outdated information sitting around in some web server somewhere that they hadn't updated and hadn't validated, hadn't verified. So when we talk about MDM, data related to our customers, for example, or our suppliers, or assets, products, locations, when we talk about MDM and we talk about the world of unstructured data, primarily text, huge opportunity here. But the opportunity is, how do we take that unstructured data and get it into a form that it is more structured so that we can apply rules at scale? There's two options here. There's try to govern it as it is, right? As it's unstructured. Then basically you're asking AI to do it. Right? And do you see the problem here, right? Which is, ask AI to go and try to do things to unstructured data so that we can better govern it for AI. It's a little paradoxical, no? But I think for some use cases that actually may be enough. For a sales and marketing use case, maybe that is enough, where we ask AI to go look and say, hey, what do you see here? Tell me something about this data. That may be enough. But for other use cases, legal, compliance, audit, fraud, the list is long. If you're in the banking and insurance world and you got all that unstructured data, you're probably going to need to find a way to structure it. There's a lot of interesting work going on, and this is not actually new. It's the world of library science. It's the world of knowledge management. How do you take that text and chunk it down into pieces that we can govern at scale using traditional MDM approaches? I don't have all the answers there. I did read a book recently from Bill Inman. If you know Bill Inman, the father of the data warehouse, he wrote a really short little book that's easy to read. You can read it in about 3 hours. It's called Turning Text into Gold, that gets into the application of ontologies, which is to take text and chunk it into something that is more digestible from a data governance and from an MDM perspective. So this is a long-winded way of saying, David, there's a ton of opportunity here. I think we need to get our arms around all of that unstructured data. There's gold in them there hills for sure. For sure there is. I think with some use cases, AI is going to be great, right? Like you'll be able to say, AI, we're working on this at Profisee. You're going to be able to say to AI, hey, take this 200 pages of text and tell me something about it. Customer name equals Malcolm, residence equals Florida, right? Like you could probably do that to a reasonable degree of accuracy for some use cases, but for other use cases, maybe not. So we live in interesting times. We live in interesting times. Parag. Hey, Parag's also from Toronto. You and David need to do a low-key data meetup. Many times we hear clients and stakeholders putting a counter argument that we just want to have the MDM done for a very specific use case, like ERP migration. How do we officially counter it? Scale, Parag, scale. That's the answer. It's all about scale. And even for a specific use case, ERP migration being a classic one, by the way. From a capabilities perspective, what would be stripped down? What would be light in that implementation, right? You still need to apply governance policies to the data. You still need to apply data quality rules. You still need to do more than likely some fairly advanced matching. You need to do data modeling and persistence. You need to do hierarchy management. That's something I haven't touched on a lot, but hierarchy management is hard. It's hard. Capabilities perspective, even in that one use case, Parag, that you're just talking about, they're all there. I don't see how, well, I only need this for an ERP migration. That means I can go build my own. Companies have actually built like MDM companies around that. Synity is one of them. There's a few others that have like kind of built tools to do data migrations. And what they ended up building was enterprise class MDM solutions because you need all the capabilities. And if I can't see capabilities that you don't need for an ERP migration that you wouldn't need for enterprise class MDM. They're all there. So I think that's the counter is, why would you build something for scratch that's going to take months and months and months and months? It's going to take tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're going to have to wait to build it. And by the end of it, you've got probably a solution that is code and not configure, right? Making it highly brittle, highly expensive, prone to failure, costly to maintain, and on and on. Now, if you are a consultant, I get it, right? There's a natural attraction there for consultants to build bespoke custom solutions, maybe for MDM, have one client pay for it, and then turn around and productize it and sell it back to other clients. That's a different story altogether. And maybe you're in the business of building and managing software, and maybe that's okay, right? If that's literally your business. But if your business is building things that aren't software, why would you want to get into the software game? I don't get it. Suman asked about MDM modernize in the coming 5-10 years. I just talked about a big way that it needs to modernize is around how MDM deals with unstructured data. That's a huge area. I do see a shift happening into what could be called, for lack of a better word, let's call it headless MDM. Profisee just announced recently that we are a native workflow in the Microsoft Fabric. And if you are a Fabric customer, and I'm not trying to advertise Profisee, this is a trend in the space, by the way. If you are a Profisee customer, you can use Profisee in the Fabric, but using Fabric UIs. Like you're in Microsoft Fabric, you never leave Fabric, you log into Fabric, but you're interacting with capabilities that are coming from Profisee, that are all of those critical capabilities I talked about, all enabled by Profisee. So this is one way that MDM is changing in the future, where we will be integrated into the data fabric infrastructures of a lot of these vendors, a lot of what Gartner would call the data and analytics governance solutions, right? That are spanning, that may be living in a Databricks or a Snowflake or an Azure or an AWS, that may be living in those environments where MDM is plugged in as an enabling capability to some of the evolving data management platforms in those environments, right? And as Microsoft has come out with Fabric, I fully expect that Snowflake and Google already kind of is trying to do something similar to this, and that Databricks will do something similar to this, where you have a single management pane at one place, one UI to run a Spark job, to do an ETL job, to run a BI process, or to run a data engineering process, or to run an MDM process. That's another way that MDM is changing. is getting cooked into those data management ecosystems of those vendors. Of course, AI is playing a huge role here. AI will increasingly automate a lot of the administration of MDM. It will automate or at least suggest, so augment, maybe not automate, but it'll suggest data quality rules. It'll suggest data matching rules. It'll say, hey, there's this entity over here that you should probably consider a master data entity because it's being shared widely across the organization. So you will have these very smart agents that are MDM centric agents that are saying, you should look here, you should consider this, you should do this, and making a lot of recommendations. And yes, that includes automation of data stewardship. I don't know why it wouldn't. So on the automation side, on the AI side, to me, it is all about, this is like AI for MDM, right? It's all about augmentation and automation and scale. When it comes to MDM for AI, it's all about that whole world of unstructured data. It's all about that, and figuring that out is going to be, when we can bridge these worlds together, I think there's going to be, it's going to be really cool. It's going to be really cool. It's a hard problem to solve, though. Thanks for the questions. Just making sure I cover off another. Federated domain ownership, can that be shared, co-owned? Yes, Peter, it can, most certainly. Eshen, another question. What are the key value propositions you discuss with clients that already have big software vendors like SAP, Informatica, IBM in-house? Oh, such a great question. So, Eshan, really, flexibility, speed, configurability, ease of use, right? A lot of those big solutions, and I know them all incredibly well, but I'll tell you from personal experience, I would talk to a CIO or a CDO probably twice a week, if not more than that, while I was a Gartner analyst, who were getting MDG. And I'm not throwing MDG under the bus, but who were getting MDG essentially for free, right? Because of the amount of money, their license commitments to SAP, who were still looking for third-party data solutions, third-party MDM solutions that were living outside of SAP. And the reason is because SAP is hard to work with. If you're a consultant, you already know this, right? Getting data in or out of SAP is hard. Writing data into SAP from an external system is hard. They make it hard, right? And the reality of today's data ecosystems is that SAP is just one piece of the puzzle. Let's just look at ERP. If you're working with any large manufacturer, they've got a little JD Edwards, they've got some Oracle, they've got some other system out there, right? Plus, outside the ERP world, they probably got Salesforce or some sort of CRM. Maybe they've got Dynamics, maybe and on and on and on. So when it comes to MDM, you got a choice, right? People like to think SAP is the center of the universe and that everything happens around SAP and that you're just going to magically bring all of that other data from everywhere else inside to SAP and have SAP continue to be the center of the universe. No, because it's hard to work with. It's expensive. Go hire some SAP consultants. You'll have an army of them and you'll go broke to solve that problem. It's easier to bring data out of SAP, master it somewhere else, and align it to a common data model so that you can have a single view of your customers, right? And again, I'm not knocking SAP. It is the world's #1 ERP for a reason. They do a lot of things really, really well. But when it comes to allowing flexibility and scalability and ease of use around their data, they don't make it easy. They don't make it easy, right? So I just threw a bunch of value props at you, Yushin. Hopefully that's helpful. Looks like there's some chats going on. Hey, Phil, nice to see you. We've got 2 minutes left, folks. I probably won't be able to do the questions justice. Hey, Simeon. Now working with Informatica. Informatica is a great product, right? It's going to check every box, but it's expensive and it's big and it's bulky and it's way harder to integrate with other systems than you think it is. It's harder to integrate Informatica to Informatica than you think it is. If you're running on-prem legacy Informatica and they're trying to push you to move to the cloud, that's probably an entirely new code base. Here's another one, Eshan, right? If you're running legacy anything, non-cloud Informatica, and then you have to migrate to the cloud, that's a net new implementation. Net new, right? Meaning you're gonna have to go through all the stuff of, all right, do I want to clean up this data? What's the new data model look like? There's new capabilities here. So that's a perfect opportunity to say, hey, well, if you have to do all that work anyway, are there other alternatives that are easier to use, a little more affordable, a little more customer centric, a little easier to integrate? So Again, not knocking Informatica, great product, but man, they're not making it easy on themselves, particularly with this migration from legacy to cloud-based solutions. So with that, folks, it's the top of the hour, now noon here on the East Coast. I wish everybody a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you found the conversation useful. If there are other questions that I didn't answer, please drop them into LinkedIn. If we're not connected on LinkedIn, we need to be. Feel free to drop me a question there. We do this once a month. Come back next month with more questions. I would love to see you again. Thanks for coming today, guys. Have a wonderful weekend. We will talk to you again sometime very soon. Bye for now.